All right, 1954, huge year for drag racing. A sport that's been organized for several years, and at this point, a lot of drag strips are running independently. There's three main sanctioning bodies. You've got the NHRA, you've got the ATAA, which is the Automobile Timing Association of America, and believe it or not, NASCAR actually sanctions drag races and does that for many years. Standardization of rules is something that won't get fully accomplished for years, but that's kind of the aim of these different sanctioning bodies. Classifications of cars, lengths of the drag strips, where the speed trap is positioned relative to the quarter mile. And at this point, a lot of tracks are still running rolling starts. The cars can get up to 5, 10, 20 miles an hour before they get to the starting line, which is going to greatly skew the elapsed time in mile per hour. This is the point in history where it's like, okay, stop. We need to go with standing start, quarter mile runs. In 1953, NHRA had put on 3 regional championship races. They did Pomona, they did Paradise Mesa in San Diego, and they did Kingdon in Northern California. And for them, 54 starts in much the same way. They put on another regional championship at Pomona, and then they go up north and do one in Santa Maria on the weekend of June 12th and 13th. And here's where we're going to take a major leap forward in drag racing. I don't know that anybody in 1954 would have known 66 years later drag racing would be what it is today. And I think we can thank a lot of that crew that went out on the road in 1954 and became known as the NHRA Drag Safari. And you say, well, what is a drag safari? Well, over the course of 1954, it was 6 different people. There was 5 men that left initially on the tour. Midway through, 2 of them came home, and another gentleman went out there. What they had is a 54 Dodge station wagon, and they had a trailer behind it packed with everything it took to put on a drag race. If you supplied the real estate, they would bring a drag race to you. They had a generator, timing equipment, miles of wiring, PA systems. In many cases, even brought the trophies to the drag strip. What they would do the days before they put on a race is meet with civic leaders and local authorities to try to further the credible reputation of hot rodders. So this deserves mention. That drag safari, which would go back out again in 1955 and 1956, couple the noteworthy members. The leader of this tour, a gentleman named Bud Coons, I had mentioned him last episode, was a Pomona motorcycle cop who now is employed as a field director for the NHRA. The gentleman that handled tech and setting up the staging lanes on the drag safari, his name is Chick Cannon. As far as I know, Chick's still alive today. And then Eric Rickman was employed by Hot Rod Magazine. They called him a photographer, but Rickman was really much more than that. In fact, I would say without him, we wouldn't have the documentation, both the written and the photography, that's given us this glimpse back into our history. So that drag safari leaves, and the first drag safari race officially is in Caddo Mills, Texas, and stop me if you've heard this before, on an airstrip. That was the weekend of June 19th and 20th, and from Texas, they just never stopped. That drag safari went across country. They hit Louisiana, Kansas, Nebraska, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Michigan, Idaho, and they finally ended up on the weekend of August 29th in Salt Lake City, Utah. Some of the noteworthy things about that first drag safari tour, that race in New Jersey was actually conducted on a 1/5 mile course. Apparently the road that they were going to compete on wasn't quite as nice and up to the standards that the drag safari would have liked, so they shortened it a little bit to keep it safe. The following race in New York was conducted on a dirt racing surface. It wasn't sand, it was hard-packed dirt, but it was a dirt racing surface. So now they've done all this drag safari, they've come back into town, and Wally had a vision that each state should have its own state championship. So they put the first one on, California State Championship, up in Madera, California, and that race was 2-way average clockings. In other words, they set up everything for a drag strip, and you ran a quarter mile that way. Then they reversed all the timing equipment, ran back the other way. So we're talking about standardizing rules. But in 1954, on that first drag safari, you got a 5th mile track, you've got a dirt track, and you've got 2-way averages there. Something really cool that came out in 1954. If I go to Hot Rod Magazine, there's an editorial by Wally Parks. And Wally's vision for this sport was that it should be all about the cars, and it should be a hobby. It should be for fun. Nobody should profit from it. And in this article, he's lambasting some of these top drivers who want to charge appearance money because they've done a really good job of marketing themselves. Things have changed. NHRA at this point has put on 12 races in 54, another 3 the year before, plus this California State Championship. They are now in the business of drag racing, and the following year, they're going to put on the first national event for NHRA. In 1954, the first drag race national event took place under the sanction of the ATAA at an airport in Lawrenceville, Illinois, and it was called the World Series of Drag Racing. It ran there for 3 years. It found a permanent home in Cordova, Illinois, and that event still goes on to this day. So by 1 year, the World Series of Drag Racing became the first drag race national event, and it's the longest continuously running one. Next episode, when we get into 1955, the NHRA Tour is going to expand in a huge way, including their first national event, little small town in Kansas, and a lot of other milestone events are taking place in the sport of drag racing. Stay tuned.